I just want to document the simple fact of that your actions and outcomes are not necessarily correlated within academic research. And this is true of other fields. So, for example, pharmaceuticals, the pharmaceutical industry, as well as entrepreneurship, if it is an entrepreneurial venture that is significantly different than current culture. And, why is this? What does it, so first of all, as somebody that studies learning, it having your actions and outcomes closer together, where it's really clear in terms of you perform this particular action and then you get this particular outcome. By performing that action, there is a direct one-to-one relationship. And the closer that actually is between the action and the outcome, right? So, for example, you might choose to, if you take this particular drug, then you feel happy. And the more immediate, the more closer that relationship actually is, the stronger that you are going to be compelled to do that particular action in the future, unless that it's negative reinforcement. So you perform this action, you have an adverse reaction, it feels like your head explodes, or you're feeling spiders all over your body, you're not inclined to ever do that particular action ever again. The difference within the academic game, or within entrepreneurship, or any particular field that's similar to pharmaceuticals, when you perform a particular action, you don't necessarily have that immediate outcome. What ends up happening is that there is a very, very indirect relationship, right? So the rewards that you're going to get are very far in the future for some fields, right? So, in terms of what I do, the rewards often are 10 years, 30 years from doing a particular action. You don't get that. So let me explain, right? So it's going to take 10 years to actually write an article and get it published. That's kind of the norm, right? Like if you look at it, you take an average of what everybody else is doing, it's 10 years. It really is. So in my field, and everybody is going to say, oh, that's not true. It is. Look at, actually ask people, survey them in terms of how long it actually takes from the start of a particular idea to where it's going to actually hit. So let's say it takes 10 years. So you work on it for 10 years. You have kind of an indirect reward when it gets published, but there is no rewards from it immediately. You have to wait for another 10 to 20 years after that, so 30 years total, by the time that people start recognizing and understanding what you're actually trying to say, and it becomes part of the general culture, right? And people recognize you for what you're doing. So you're looking at 20, 30 years out by the time you started performing a particular action, by the time you get any rewards from that. Now, that is a really long time. That is an extremely long time, but it's not unusual in terms of changing culture, changing society, changing anything that involves people. It takes a long time. People are, first of all, the sort of general group that you're talking to immediately, very hard to change, and probably, I would argue, impossible. You cannot convince people that are determined to believe a particular kind of thing, right? So you could look at Kuhn, for example, talked about this. This is well-known philosophy of science stuff. And so you got to wait until there's a new generation that sort of becomes your acolytes for what you're actually doing, right? And then that becomes, you're not really convincing anybody in that particular case. You're accepting people that sort of accept a new reality. So there's that goes on. But then as well, there is to the extent of how much you perform that particular action, right? It's not necessarily just perform that particular thing, but to the extent that you actually perform it, doesn't have a direct relationship at all in academia, right? Like, the more harder you work, the more effort you put in within the immediate term, right? So within the next 5 years, the harder you work doesn't equate to the rewards that you actually get. It really does not. What ends up happening is that there is a lot of environmental effects that happen. So what are those? Things like being part of the right team, things like being within a certain kind of culture within that particular team. And right is very subjective, right? So I would view right as you're going to work on a good idea, but other people would view right as let's publish as many articles as possible. And those are different. They're fundamentally different. And obviously if you sort of work on if you publish as many articles as possible, you're going to publish more articles, right? So there's that aspect of it as well, the sort of environmental impact that really waters down between the action that you perform and the rewards that you actually get, right? We also know that there's kind of a status hierarchy, and this is super well documented. There is a status hierarchy within institutions, within the academic environment, right? So if you are trying to publish at a lower tier university, good luck. It is infinitely more harder than if you're at everybody recognizes that particular university. And the reason is that the resources aren't there. You don't have what is called the sort of status, people just default to you. You don't have that benefit of the doubt that lots of people have. So benefit of the doubt is really incredibly important, particularly with scientific ideas. So, for example, you might have an idea that is just on the cusp of okay, I believe this, I don't believe this. But if you have the benefit of the doubt, they're going to default to you. And the way that, these sort of little things work is they look at, your institution and things like that. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's not possible. It's all double blind. It's double blind based on the writer and also the reviewers. The editors, it's impossible to be double blind for the editors. It's also impossible. It's not that it's very difficult to be double blind in a small world, where your reviewers, because they have the technical competency, they are not, they're not going to be they're not going to know who you are. Or they're going to know who you are because it's a small world, right? There's just not that many people in this world that understand it, right? It's kind of a myth that anybody can do this kind of stuff. And so it's a really small world phenomenon, and everybody kind of knows who each other. And so here's how it might even work. If they don't know who you are, and it's kind of a random thing, reviewers are guessing, and if they are guessing, there might be but if they know who you are, they might give you actually a little bit more benefit of the doubt. Now, it could go in the opposite direction. If they know who you are, then you could be penalized for that. But, it's often the opposite, right? Because everybody's kind of looking out for each other, if they know who they actually are, right? Nobody wants to be a mean person in any sort of way. That's crazy. But that sort of desire to be not a mean person, some people probably desire to be like that. I shouldn't generalize, but the desire to be not a mean person is going to encourage his behavior even more, because the people that have been around the longest, they all kind of know each other. There is a ton of status effects that everybody understands, right, is what I'm saying. And that's why everybody's tried to seek with, to work with senior scholars and all those kind of things. So what I'm getting at is that there is not a direct relationship between when you perform something and you get that outcome. In fact, there might be even a negative relationship, to the extent that if you are really instrumental used in a bad way, or transactional, where you're working really hard and you're really just like, you're in it, and everybody knows that you're in it just to not be, to look out for yourself. You're very self-interested. Then you're going to be penalized for that as well, right? Like, you may be penalized for it. That's a speculation, but I would argue that there is probably definitely some of that going on, because people just don't want to be around somebody that they are uncomfortable around, right? Like, that's very much human nature. So if you look at this, right, like your relationship between the effort that you put in and actually what you get out of it, it's a really murky, super murky process that I would argue is not clear. I would argue that there is not a direct relationship. If you're thinking of like correlation, some people think of correlation. It might be, if we're correlated between 0 is no correlation at all, and 1 is being perfectly correlated together, you're looking at a 0.05, correlation between actually putting in the effort and getting the rewards for that particular effort. So what do you do in this circumstance? Well, then you got to think about the sort of cultural aspects of what you're doing, and really think about like reflecting on, wait a minute, I gotta become a better person. I gotta rise above this. I have to be a good person. I need to focus on me and develop me, regardless of those particular outcomes, regardless of what you're going to get happen, right? It's like entrepreneurship. You try, but then if the results don't come through, then you're just going to be like, okay, I'm a good person, I'm nice, I'm honest, and I'm going to keep this up. And that's it. You really have to focus on that and not focus on the sort of results. And I know culturally there is a drive right now towards results within science, but it's wrong. It is fundamentally wrong to focus on results when science itself produces outcomes that are often negative. And so if you are looking for results and you're incentivizing results, you're always going to incentivize behavior where people are going to only choose things that will provide results. It's a classic p-value, what's called p-value statistical significance, sort of searching behavior, and there's tons of research written on this. Probably tens of thousands of articles at this point written on, p-hacking and the sort of negative culture in science, and it's becoming a lot more in the open. We had the credibility crisis and the reproducibility crisis in the last 10 years. And it's part and parcel. The reason is because of these strong incentives to be productive, which is just flat out wrong within science. So I want you to remember that you're just a good person. And if you can reflect on that you're a good person, you're a decent person, and you don't need to show to anybody, and you can get up and know that you could just do the same old thing no matter what happens, the outcomes you get, man, that is a long ways that you have come as a person. You ignore all of those stupid outcomes, and you just focus on putting in the work, and you just focus on just like the immediate rewards that you get for the satisfaction, the joy, all of those kind of things. That's what you need to focus on. You can't focus on any of the external rewards, publications, and all that kind of stuff. That stuff is nonsense, and it's going to mess you up repeatedly if you do that. So don't focus on that stuff. Focus on just being a nice person. Focus on getting up, enjoying your day, loving your, friends and family that are by you, and that's it. That's ultimately what you need to do, and just put in the work, regardless of what the outcomes actually are. So I think that is an important lesson to learn. All right, take care and have a wonderful day.